Okay, so I have a full screen. I can't actually see the chat. Again, like no, on my system downstairs, I usually have it in on two screens and I can see the chat at the same time. So someone's gonna have to unmute themselves and tell me if there's a question, if there's something that I should stop for, which please do interrupt me, because if you are confused about something, you're likely not the only person. So in terms of getting started, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm guessing, given that there were instructions beforehand, that most folks have installed what you need. But if you haven't, the first step for getting started with R is to install both R and RStudio. And again, like I said, when I started out, I was actually very confused by this, because it was like, wait a second, I need to install two things. I thought I was just using R. So let me kind of talk you through the installation process, and then we'll talk through like why you have to install two things. So the first thing you do if you have not ever installed R before is you install R. So on my slide here, I have a link to, and I'll actually just open it up here, what's called the Comprehensive R Network, AKA CRAN. And this is where you can find R to download R and use it for your operating system. I'm guessing most folks here are either on Mac or Windows. If you're on Linux, you can of course select that as well. So if you are on a Mac, for example, you would click that. And then there are basically two options. Either you download the version if you have a slightly older Mac, or if you have a new fancy M1 Mac, you would download that one. If you're on Windows, you would go to the Windows page, and then you can just hit the base and then hit download R 4.1.1 for Windows. From there, all you really need to do is you just need to install it like you would any other app. If you're on Linux, I am guessing you can figure out, to be honest, I've never used Linux, but people who are on Linux tend to be a bit more advanced with this kind of thing. So I'm guessing you can figure out which distribution you're using and what you need to install. All right, so if you have not installed R, go ahead and do that now. I'm gonna talk briefly about R itself, and then we can also go over any questions. So the thing with when people say R, what I just talked about having you download is the kind of is R, and you can in fact work directly within R. So for example, I'm gonna just go to my Spotlight. I'm on a Mac, oops, and I'll open up R. And you can work directly in R. So when you open it up, it's going to give you these messages. People always always ask me about why it says absolutely no warranty in bold letters. I'm not entirely, I know there's some background there, but around licensing, but don't worry about that. The most important thing is you get a cursor here. And when you work in just R, you can work at the R console. So you can do things like I could type 2 + 2, and R will return a value. So for example, it will return 4. I can do 8 × 10, it will return 80. I can do 9 ÷ 3, it will return 3. You get the idea, right? You can use R to do, in this case, I can do any kind of mathematical operation. So I do see that there are chats. Just, I'm going to keep going, but if there are things that folks that I need, just someone let me know, please. So if you haven't, go ahead and open R. So if you've downloaded RStudio, I'm not asking you to open RStudio, just download R. So you should see what I saw. And I want you to enter, 2 + 2 or whatever, and see your result. So let me actually just go through this. So sorry, that's what I did. I worked directly in R. I did 2 + 2 and I saw the result. So for you, I want you to download and install R, then open it, and then just make any kind of mathematical expression, enter it, and make sure it works. I'm going to pause for a minute or two. I'm going to actually open up the chat and see if there are questions, and then we'll come back and I'll keep working. Let me exit that.
Okay. Sarah, I'm glad you found it. I think we've answered all the questions in the chat, David.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. I think we're caught up.
Okay.
Someone did have a question about how often you want to update your version of R and RStudio. I don't know. Everybody has opinion. Jean said maybe once a year. Somebody said once a semester. I did it just yesterday and it like broke a bunch of stuff. So.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it is a personal preference thing. I actually did it yesterday too, because I was recording some materials and I needed to demonstrate how to update R. And it also, I wouldn't say it broke things, but it the packages that I had previously installed, I had to reinstall.
Yeah.
So that's just something to keep in mind. For me, how often, realistically, I probably update it maybe once every 6 months, or if I see that there's a new major version. So for example, R 4.0 came out several months ago, and I updated when that happened. All right, I'm gonna continue. Let's talk now about RStudio. So you can just work in the R console. And I was actually talking to a friend several months ago, and he's like, oh yeah, I use R2. And I was like, oh cool, you use RStudio? He's like, no, I just use the R console. Which, again, it's possible. I would not recommend it, and I don't think most people actually do that. So RStudio, I've actually taken this from the Modern Dive book. In the materials, there's a link to that really great introduction book. And they use this metaphor where R is the engine. So, doing things like the mathematical operations that we did just a minute ago, R gives you the engine that allows you to do that. But RStudio provides a really nice dashboard that helps you to drive. So I don't know, I guess if I were to extend this metaphor for a while, I don't know if there is a way to drive, I don't know much about cars. If there would be a way to kind of drive, without a fancy dashboard, maybe like old-timey cars that just had like a steering wheel, basically. That would be the equivalent of working just in R. But RStudio is going to provide a really nice dashboard that will allow us to kind of organize things, see what's going on. So I definitely recommend you use RStudio. So if you use RStudio, you have this user interface. You can see stored information. You can save code. This is a bit cut off, but you can see, for example, plots that you make, things that you have saved. Some really old code that I wrote probably like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So to get RStudio, you just need to go to the RStudio website. You're going to see that there are different versions. So if you are at the top of this page, you'll say choose your version. For most people, and when people think about R being open source and it's free, they're talking about what they use typically is RStudio Desktop. So just hit download whatever the latest version for your operating system is. And again, just go ahead and install that. So I'm going to give you in just a second, now I'll give you a brief tour of RStudio, and I'll flip over to RStudio in just a second. When we open up RStudio, it's got 4 panes. So by default, you'll have your scripts on the top left. You'll have your environment or history kind of on the top right. There are other things that each of these panes can do, but I'm just kind of talking about like the most common things. Your console and terminal will be on the bottom left, and your files, plots, packages, help will be on the bottom right. If you don't know what these things are and you're wondering what I'm talking about, don't worry, I will talk through each of them. Let me actually flip over to RStudio. So right now, what you're seeing, see if I can put that somewhere else. Okay, is my RStudio. In the top left, this is where I have code that I'm working on. So this is an R Markdown document, which we'll briefly touch on. On the bottom left here is my console. And let me actually, just to show you, I'm just quitting RStudio and I'll come back in. The thing to note about your console, you can run code in your console. And if you actually look here, you'll see that your console is exactly what we saw here when we just opened R itself. So basically, RStudio has, the console has, you know, what we saw when we just opened R, but it adds a bunch of things, a bunch of other panes on top of that. So, you know, again, like I could do, 2 + 2 and get 4 there. Again, this is where code we write will live. Up here will be our environment. So when we, for example, read in data, it will show up here. Down in the bottom here, you can see there are various files that are part of the project that I'm working with. Okay, so again, I'm assuming that folks have downloaded and installed RStudio. If you haven't, go ahead and do that now. And then if you want to, I'll probably just go quickly through this because I think folks, most folks have installed RStudio. You can do the same thing in the console if you want to use any mathematical operators to create an expression and make sure that it works. Let me stop for a second and pause, see if there are any questions at this point. Cool.
I don't see any.
Okay, well, I will continue. Please interrupt as, you know, again, I assume most folks did those 2 things, but I wanted to just go over them to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, now that we've downloaded and installed R and downloaded and installed RStudio, we're ready to start talking about using RStudio. So we're gonna start by talking about projects. RStudio has the concept of projects, which allows us to kind of keep all our files together when we're working on a particular project. So with projects, and I'll show you how they work in just a second, they allow you to keep together things such as files, such as any R script files. So any code that you've written, you can save it as part of a project. You can create and save what are called R Markdown files. I'll briefly touch on these shortly. Any data file, so for example, if you have a CSV or an Excel file that you want to have as part of your project, projects allow you to keep those all together.
Hey David, Gary has a quick question. If RStudio wants an update, what's the best method to update?
So I would just go to the RStudio the download page and just re-download the latest version and just install that, and that'll like overwrite, that'll update whatever you have. Just make sure you quit RStudio before you do that. Oh, interesting. Thanks, Shelly. I didn't know that that was an option. Good to know. Okay, so with a sample project, this is kind of a sample project, this kind of visual that I have where you have, you know, all of the pieces together, scripts, your environment, files, console, etc. Let me show you how to create a new project. So if I want to create a new project, if I'm in RStudio, I would go to File, New Project, and then it will open up a window. For some reason, it's always really slow opening up this window. I've never, I don't know why, but it always is. Did I not do the right thing? It's just going. Oh, it's going just very slowly. Okay, so you can then choose, do you want to put your project in a new directory, in an existing directory? You may or may not have version control depending on how you have set things up. So I'll just say, let's make a new directory. It'll give you a bunch of options. Starting out, you're always just going to choose new project. From there, you are just going to, you need to give your project, put it in a directory that you choose, and then choose where to put it. So for now, let me just put it on the desktop, and I'll just call this test project. And when I do that, it will open up that project. And you can see right now, I don't have any files. The only file I have is this special.rproj file, which is just an RStudio project file, which will, if we want to, can open this back up. So the way I would do that, let me actually close that. So if I go to my desktop, and you can see I now have this test project. And if I click this, you'll see that it will then open up RStudio, and it will put me back within this particular project that I was working on. So I'm actually not going to work on that project because I need to go back to the project that I was working on, which is this intro meetup 1, October 2021. So I know people always ask me, like, how should I divide up my work? How should I decide when to make a new project? I'd say anytime you have any kind of functionally new deliverable, it's tough to say, but typically for me, like whenever I have, there's going to be a new report at the end or something like that, I'll typically make a new project. It just allows me to kind of separate things. So, when I'm working on this thing, I just work in this project. It'll be something that I think you'll get the feel of more too as you kind of go on. Yep, so I showed how you can quit RStudio and then open up your project. So let's go ahead and have you all create a new project. Doesn't matter if it's in a new or existing directory. After you've created it, I want you to do what I did. Find the .rproj file and reopen your project. So make sure when you create the new project that you simplicity, I would suggest just putting it on your desktop for now. Okay, oops. All right, so I'm going to pause for a couple minutes, let folks do that, see if there are any questions, and then we'll go from there.
David, someone has a question about file paths.
Interesting. Sarah, why don't you try it again without spaces? I haven't seen that happen to me, but try it with no spaces and see if that works. And if folks actually don't mind, what I've done in other trainings like this where people are, where we're on Zoom, if folks can just do the little reaction thing with like a thumbs up to let me know that you have been able to do this here, that would be helpful. Cool, I'm seeing a bunch of folks saying they got it, awesome. Awesome, we'll take another 30 seconds or a minute, let other folks get it, and then we'll move on. Rachel, you got a project options box. I'm guessing you're talking about that. In which case you can choose either new directory or existing directory.
No, that's actually not what I got.
Oh, that's not it?
No, it says project options, use default to inherit the global setting, restore R data into workshop at startup, save workshop to R data on exit. And there's a lot of things on the side of it. Like code editing and R Markdown.
So did you go to tools, project options like that?
That's what it looks like. I don't think I went to tools or objects. I thought I went to the file.
Okay, I'm not sure how that happened, but you can just hit cancel for now. That's
okay,
fine.
Just try it again.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue. For folks who are having, if anyone's having trouble getting the code, I'm going to actually have you download it. I'll give you some code that will actually have you download it in just a second. Okay. Speaking of which, so I'm going to have, I've put together a course project, or I guess probably call it a workshop project. This is adapted from a free course that I have on the R for the Rest of Us website called Getting Started with R. So I'm going to have you download this, and I'll put up the your turn. I'll demonstrate how to do it, and then and I'll also put the code in. I may or may not put it in the chat because it tends to, well, I'll show you. It kind of sometimes it messes up the quotes. Wait, that's not right. Hold on. I just need to refresh this. Okay. So what we're going to do, we are going to use a package called the use this package, and that will allow us to, the code that I have here will allow us to easily download the materials that we're going to use today. So I'm going to copy that, and let me go into RStudio and show you. And actually, let me do it one line at a time. That'll work out better. Oops. Okay, so I will first, I'm going to run in the console, install packages, and then in quotes, use this. This is installing a package that, again, we're just going to use that will allow us to download the materials pretty easily. Okay, so let me actually put this. You don't necessarily need to do this if you already downloaded materials. To the same. I made like a couple tiny little changes right before, but no, you should be fine. R is case sensitive, yes. I'll talk about that in a little bit more in just a second. Once you've done that, it'll give you this message here. It's downloading, and then it'll say the downloaded binary packages are in that location. That means it's installed. Let me actually just make it a little bit bigger for folks. At this point, we can just type library, use this. So again, I will put that in the chat. And that's just now giving us access to the functions from the use this package. Last thing I'm going to do, and this is what actually changed from the materials that were on there. So if you downloaded them like yesterday, I just changed the location of what you download. So we're going to use this code, use course, and then the URL in quotes like that. I'm going to go ahead and run that. And when I do that, all this function does is it's just a really easy way to help you download the materials. So it's going to ask, it's going to say downloading into, for me, it's users David Kai's desktop. It'll by default put things on your desktop. It'll ask if that's okay. Just say whichever one is yes. It might look different for you. So for me, that's 1. It'll download that. And after it's downloaded it, then it'll ask if it should delete that zip file. Again, whichever one is yes, and that's fine. And then it will go into, it'll actually open up that project for you. So let me put in the use course line, which should give you access to those materials. So what you'll know that it works when it opens up, it'll say intro meetup 1, October 2021, main. So let me pause for a second, and I'm going to put my screen back up so folks, have this. Actually, I'll leave it like this so I can also see participants. Just if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up when you got it. Sorry, I don't have enough screen here, so. And if you run into issues, just put those in the chat. All right, Mari said you can open up or update RStudio. Feel free. Ooh, I see some good questions. Bobby, I will actually take your question in just a second. Let me let folks just finish doing this. And actually, Kate, same thing. Give folks just another minute or so, and then I'll talk about each of those. Yep, it will open up a new RStudio window, and yes, you can delete the zip file. Rachel, that message is totally fine as long as it works for you. It should, but if it doesn't work, let us know. Great, I see some thumbs up, thank you. Great, thanks, Jocelyn. Aubrey, thank you. All right, let's take another 30 seconds and then we'll move on. If you download the zip file, yeah, Crystal is absolutely right. You can, if you download it before, that's totally fine. Rena, I'm going to put the line in the chat where you, what you'll do, what you need to do first, library use this, and then that use course line. So in the opposite order of the way they're actually in the chat. Kate, excellent question. I will actually get to that in just a second. Hopefully I remember all the questions. So there's our tools. What was that? Where did that go? Our tools, the use this package, and what packages are. Perfect. So if you, yes, Rena, just put that in the console. So just down here is where you can put it. Okay, so to answer your questions, and Sarah, you don't need to specify that. You can just use the default destination. That's destination directory. So just use the default. So the idea, well, I'll talk about package, like kind of what a package is. The use this package, to be honest, I don't want to diminish your question, but I wouldn't actually worry about it that much because it's really more of an advanced package. It's typically used for things like if you're making your own package or if you're installing certain types of packages. for now, I just needed folks to, it was a package that makes it easy for folks to download materials. So it's not something you're gonna actually use very much, at least not at this point. If you are on Windows and you got asked about installing R tools, let me actually go back. So if you go, and I'll put this URL in the chat. When you go to, if you click on download R for Windows, and then can click R tools, you may need to download that. To be honest, I'm not a Windows user. And so I don't, from what I've heard, I mean, I've had like 2,000 something people sign up for my Getting Started course. And some of the people tell me they do have to use it, I think, and some don't. So I'm not totally sure about why you do and why you don't. But if you do need to, just again, go to this page and download whichever one is for your version or your computer. And then you should be able to restart RStudio, just close it, open it back up, and you should be good. Okay. Okay, that's awesome. All right, let me keep going. And I will say, I'm gonna actually take in about, at like, well, 5 o'clock my time. I know it's not 5 o'clock for other folks. We'll take a short break, let folks stretch or maybe get out of your car or do whatever will work for you.
Hey, David, there's been a couple people that said that they got the message that Use This was built under our version 4.0.5, but that's just a warning message. That shouldn't mess up anything, right? That's what we...
Yep.
Okay.
It should be fine. If anyone runs into issue, like if you're not able to install or get the materials, let me know. But yes, it's just a warning message. So I'll talk about packages more generally in just a minute, because we'll get to those. All right, so let's talk about files in R. So actually, before I do that, so down here is where we view all the files that are within the directory that is where we're working for this project. So I'm working in this directory, and let me actually even go into, so I'm on a Mac again, so you can see these are all the files that are in this folder, aka directory. And so within an RStudio project, the files that you will see will be the exact same ones that are within that folder. Okay, so it's exactly the same here. So in terms of files in R, there are really two types of files primarily. There are R script files, and these end in, they have the .r extension. And with these, it's assumed that text that you write in the R code, or text that you write is R code, unless you comment it. And if you're like, what the heck is he talking about? Don't worry, I will talk more about this shortly. But just as an example, if I go over here, there is, for example, an exercises.r file, which you should see. And this is where we're going to end up putting some code. There's also what are called R Markdown documents. If you're not familiar with R Markdown, here, let me actually open up quickly the chat and put a link to an article that I wrote about R Markdown and why it's so powerful. It's just a way where you can write reports, say, in R. So instead of having, I mean, I typically contrast R Markdown with like a workflow where you get your data, say you import it to SPSS, you do any kind of data cleaning, analysis, Then you spit out your clean data to Excel, you make your graphs, then you copy your graphs into Word and you write your report. R Markdown allows you to do that all in a single place within an R Markdown file. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to really get to how R Markdown works today. But the important thing to know is R Markdown files end in .rmd. And within those, it's assumed that text is assumed to be text unless you put it in what's called a code chunk, which I actually said more on this soon, although that might be a lie. I'm not actually sure if we're going to get to it. So if you go to the slides directory and you find, for example, the getting started with r.rmd, this is an R Markdown document. This is a bit meta, but this document actually allows me to make the slides that you're seeing. So this is the code that I wrote that ends up generating this. So for example, if I search for file types, whoops, I think I have an extra space. This code here is what makes this slide. You can do all sorts of things, reports, slides, dashboards with R Markdown. Let's talk though about making our script files, which is basically what we're gonna do today. So you can make a new R script file by going to File, New File, R script. And actually before we do that, let me just flip over here. So File, New File, R script. And so you can see I have untitled 1 here. If I save this, let me just, so I use the keyboard shortcut, Command S on Mac. You can also just hit save there. I'll just call this temp, and you'll see it'll automatically add the .r on the end. And so I could have, for example, where I did library use this, I did that in the console before. I could also actually just put it in an R script file, and I could run it there. I'm not going to because it doesn't, we've already done what we needed to do with use this, but in a second you'll see about, we'll import some data and take a look at it using some code within an R script file. So if you haven't, just go ahead and create a new R script file, save it, just so you see what that process looks like. Okay, so you can run code. There's several ways to do it. So let me actually flip over here. Let's say I want to run this line, this library, use this. First of all, what most people starting out see is there's this run button, and I can do that. That will run it. When you start using R a lot, that you won't want to go up here and click every single time. So you'll probably want to use the keyboard shortcut. So if you're on Mac, that's Command Enter will run whatever line you're on. You don't need to highlight the whole thing or anything like that. You can just, as long as your cursor is anywhere on that line, it'll run. And on Windows, that's Control Enter. So there's also within R, there's the idea of comments. Within an R script file, anything that starts with the # is a comment. And typically it's the kind of thing that you want to do to say like what you're doing in your code. And I put do them for others and for your future self. What I mean by that is you will often want to write comments so that when you work on something this week and then don't work on it again until next week or next month, and you forget what you were doing, if you write a comment, that will help you to remember. So let's say, for example, I wanted to write a comment here. I mean, this is contrived because I know what this does, but let's say I want to load the use this package. So by starting my line with a #, this is not run. So like if I even hit run, I don't even know. Oh, it looks like it actually runs the next line. It won't run this line because it knows, okay, this is an R script file. So anything that starts with a # is not code that's a comment. See if there's any. Cool. All right, so that's comments, R script files. I'll go through one more thing, which is the idea of packages, and then I think take a break at that point. So let me go ahead and talk about packages. The incredible thing about R, when people say they use R, is that it's not just R itself. Like, it's not just what you have when you first start out. There are a ton of what are called packages. So packages add functionality that's not present in base R, and they're really where much of the power of R is found. Again, oh, sorry, I got cut off, but this is also from Modern Dive. The metaphor that they use is that R is like a new phone, whereas R packages are like apps that you download, right? So like you get a new phone, it's pretty powerful, like it can do a lot, but there are probably specific things you want to do. I don't know, maybe you want to go on Twitter, so you download the Twitter app, or you want to, you know, get it, you're on an iPhone and you want the Google Maps app. You download a package to do whatever specific thing that it is that you want to do. And the benefit of R being open source is that you can, basically, if you can think of something that you want R to do, it is highly, highly likely that someone has written a package that would allow you to do that. I'd say at this point, it's rare that I'm like, oh, I wish R could do X, and I can't find a package. There are thousands and thousands of packages. We're going to use two packages, although one of them, the first one, is actually kind of unusual. It's called the tidyverse, and it's actually a collection of packages. Specifically, we're going to use today the readr package to import our data. When you, and I'll show you in a second when we load the tidyverse, it'll actually show you which packages it's loading. But there probably are a couple other, or a few other packages that are like this. The tidyverse is kind of unusual in that it's a package that brings together multiple packages. We're also going to use the Skimar package. It provides easy summary statistics, and it's a really nice way to just kind of get a sense of our data. Let me actually check the. Cool. All right. So I saw one question actually about GitHub. You don't need to know anything at this point about GitHub. That's where we hosted the code and just where you accessed it, but no, you don't need to know anything about that. So to install packages, you will use install.packages, just like we did with use this. And the package name has to be in quotes. If I were to type, for example, well, let me even do it. Let me show you. So if I did install.packages, oops, I'm so used to adding that quote that I did it automatically, but let me do tidyverse. It'll give me this error in install packages, object tidyverse not found. You can't install a new package if you don't put the name in quotes. You have to put it in quotes. And the way it works with packages is that you need to install them once per computer. So once you install the packages that we're going to use today, you won't need to do it on your computer again. Slight caveat, if you update R, depending on what type of update you do, you might need to reinstall them. But the nice thing is that the way you do it is really simple. You just run that line again. The other thing I'm going to mention, just to make explicit, is that when I install packages, and I recommend you do this, do it in the console. Up here in our script files is where we're going to run code that we want to save for a future session when we're working. But because, again, just as a reminder, packages only need to be installed once per computer. We don't need to run that code over and over and over. We just need to install the package once. So your console is where you want to put code that you're just going to use one time. Okay, so that's why I did it down. That's why I would install it down here. Cool. And then the thing with R is just because you have a package installed doesn't mean you can use it. So to use a package, you have to do what's called loading it. And the way we do that is with the function library. So for example, if I run library tidyverse or library skimar, that will load those packages. And here, once we've installed them, now they no longer need to be quoted, although you can quote them if you want. So you'll see, for example, well here, like I did library use this, you could also do like library tidyverse. And I don't know if you saw that, but it actually does a nice little autocomplete thing. And then I could either hit the run or I'll do command enter to run that, which will load the tidyverse. And there's a message there that you probably want to see or will probably be slightly confused about. So we'll talk about it in just a second. I'll come back to that. So at this point, I'm going to have you open the project you downloaded before. You probably already have it open. I'm going to have you open the exercises.r file. And actually, these directions are slightly confusing, I'm realizing now. I should probably change them. So you can actually just skip opening. Actually, no, it's fine. For now, if you want to just open that exercises.r file, just in the main directory. The way this is it's gonna work from here on out is I have instructions that are set as comments. So for example, here it says, install the tidyverse and skimar packages using the install packages function. Again, I don't actually recommend doing it this way. I would typically do it down here in the console, but just for now, we can do it here. Okay, so install those two packages. And then I want you to go down to this section here and load your packages. So load both the tidyverse and skimar. Okay. So let's go ahead. I think at this point, I'm going to let folks work on that. Why don't Crystal or one of the other organizers, should we take like 5-10 minutes, let short break and folks work on that, and then we'll come back together?
Does that
sound good?
Fine. Yeah.
How about we do it at 5:10 my time, which is, well, depends where you are. And if folks have questions as you're working, please just put them in the chat. I'll be gone for just a second, but I will come back and take a look at them in a few minutes. Okay.
Thanks, David.
All right, we'll start again in just a minute. Kate, feel free to chime in whenever you figure that out. I or somebody else here can hopefully help you with that. Let me see, I'm going to close this in the interest of screen space. So let me, I saw that question, I'll get to that in just a second. So if you, just to make sure everybody did everything, you should have gone and done install packages tidyverse and then install packages Skimar. I'm not going to run these lines because I already have them installed. The tidyverse one, especially if you're installing it for the first time, might take a while. Skimar should be relatively quick. What you're going to do then down here, if you didn't do this, is library tidyverse and then library skimr. So these I would run. So I'm going to hit Command Enter. Actually, let me do one thing. I'm going to restart my session so it's as if I'm starting fresh. When I do Command Enter on library tidyverse, you are going to get this message. Let's move this over just a bit. And people are always confused by this, saying like, what's this talking about? Recall that the tidyverse is actually an unusual package insofar as it's a collection of packages. So all these packages here, ggplot2, per, tibble, dplyr, etc., are the collection of packages that make up the tidyverse. So what it's telling you is when you run library tidyverse, it's actually loading all of those packages for you. That's the first thing. The second thing is this conflicts, I guess, down here. What it's telling you is when you load the tidyverse, when you run library tidyverse, there is a function, so the green filter here. What this syntax means here with a dplyr and then a double colon and then filter, that means a function called filter from the dplyr package. And when it says masks stats filter, that means that there is another function within the stats package, which is one of the base R packages. So whenever you load R, that package is just loaded automatically. You don't have to type like library stats. But what it's telling you is, okay, now that you've loaded the tidyverse, if you ever use the function filter, I'm going to use the version from dplyr, not the version from the stats package. And then saying the same thing with the lag function. So it's nothing to worry about. It's just telling you that that's what it's doing. Cool. All right. And then library skimmer. Okay. I think there was one other question that I said I was going to get to, and I did not. Well, if there was a question that I said I was going to get to and I did not, please just ask it again because I think
we got to it. It was about red lines.
Oh, okay. Cool. The tidyverse tends to be very verbose. It'll just tell you everything that it's doing. And a lot of times it'll give you messages that look like something's gone wrong, but they're just warnings, or it's just telling you, hey, this is what I did. So don't be alarmed. All right.
Oh, there is a new error.
Okay, I'm guessing Crystal or Janine, you can try.
Yeah, we can
helping
try
that
it.
person who's having trouble. Cool. All right, I'm going to continue on and hopefully get help for folks. So let's talk now about importing data. And the thing to understand with R is that you don't actually have data until you run code that imports it into R. And I know this is really confusing to me because, so I primarily used Excel before I came to R. And there's no idea within Excel of like separating out, this is where data lives that I do analysis from. This is like my raw data file, right? Like it's all just like an Excel file. That's where you write formulas, you do your analysis. Within R though, it's actually different. We have like our raw data, which will, for now, it's gonna be CSV files, although you can read in any type of data into R. Again, there are packages for reading in, say, SPSS data, check out the Haven package. Anything you can think of, you can pretty much read in. So the way to do that is to write code that reads in that data. So this line here, which I'm gonna actually copy over into RStudio in just a second, will read in data from a CSV file, and then it will assign it to an object called fake Tucky. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, like what's an object, what do you mean by assign it? I'm gonna actually talk about both of those in just a second. But let me go ahead and flip over here. And I'm gonna copy that here. And I'm actually not gonna put this in the chat because I actually think when you're learning, it's best not to copy code. So I would encourage you just to write it out. When I read this, what you're gonna see, let me bring this over here, is that now in my environment, I have what's called an object that's called fake Tucky. So the only way I have data that I can use within R is if I see it here in my environment. And the only way I get something here in my environment is if I run a line of code or lines that allow me, or that create that object here. So again, like I have a raw CSV file here, and I could open that in Excel or whatever and look at it that way. I mean, I could even actually open it up in, it's pretty big, I don't want to do it. I could open it up here. Trust me, it's just a CSV file, but I can also import it with this code here. I know there was a question before about read CSV versus read.csv. So for example, there's read.csv. There are two functions that do with the same goal in mind to import a CSV file. The second one here on line 21, the .csv is from the base R. This one on line 19, read underscore CSV is from the tidyverse. I'm gonna, for today, you're gonna need to use the read underscore CSV because we'll get to something later that won't work if you do read.csv. Let me check the chat. Okay.
I think we're figuring it out, David.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, actually, someone was asking about this. Is R case sensitive? Yes, it definitely is case sensitive. And so what my suggestion for you, and I saw actually some discussion of this in the chat, is when you create objects, you're working with things, just be consistent. I've given you a couple or three kind of options here. And I'll show you what I mean by this in just a second. There's like a snake case where you write a word and then underscore to separate between words. So snake underscore case, camel case, periods in names. I am a big fan of snake case. That's what I like doing a lot. So for example, if you wanted to create an object called student data, if I were going to do that, I would probably do student underscore data. But again, I've written like examples of what you can do if you want to create objects in other with other approaches. The other thing I'm going to mention is that you need to think about your directories when you're working within R. So if you noticed, let me flip back here. And I'm gonna, actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna comment that to indicate that we're not gonna run it. I'm gonna copy this in and I'm gonna say fake Tucky is, we assign to fake Tucky the results of reading a CSV. But if I do just read CSV fake tucky.csv, you're going to note that it's going to say fake tucky does not exist in the current working directory. And that's because if you look at your files here within your project, our working directory is the root of our project folder. So in other words, this where our .rproj lives. So if I look here, there's nothing called faketucky.csv. There's only an object, or there's only a file that's faketucky.csv within the data folder. So that's why I need to run read CSV and then in quotes data/faketucky.csv. And that works, but that does not work. Okay. Yeah, a couple other things here. I'm just gonna power through those. Again, that's what I said before, but our data, when we import it, lives in the environment history pane. So if you have not already, I want you to open up the exercises.r file, import the data into a data frame called faketucky, and make sure that you can see that faketucky object within your environment history pane. Let's take a minute. Getting most folks kind of did this as I was talking, but if you don't mind just giving me a little thumbs up or something to let me know, or if you have other questions, that would be great.
Sarah, can you let us know what your issue is and we can try to help you troubleshoot?
Bobby, I saw your comment about being like Java. I don't know Java. I don't actually understand exactly how that object.function would work. So if you want to explain it more, I can do my best to give you an explanation. So actually, the thing that I see Sarah dealing with is actually something that's really common. So let me actually show you how Sarah likely got that. What I just did now is I restarted my session. So it's as if, in this case, the most important thing is that I haven't actually run the lines where it's library tidyverse and library Skimar. So if I try to run this line now, and I hit run, it's going to say could not find function read CSV, read underscore CSV. And the reason why is you can only run that function after you've loaded the package that the function is a part of. So if I do library tidyverse now, I'll just load Skimar for good measure. Now I can go down here and now it will work. Okay, cool. I'm going to continue on. So you heard me in the last little section talk about objects and functions. Let's talk about what objects and functions are. I like to use this quote, and I'll just read it and then we'll talk about it. So to understand computations in R, two slogans are helpful. Everything that exists is an object, and everything that happens is a function call. So this is from John Chambers, quoted in Hadley Wickham's Advanced R book. And let's think about this. Specifically, I've given an example of reading in data. It's not the fake tucky, but it's the same concept. So in our, when we wrote that code, again, remember, everything that exists is an object. So if I look here, fake tucky exists, metaphorically speaking, right? But it exists within our RStudio. We can see it. So it's an object, and everything that happens is a function. So read CSV is a function because that's what happened. In other words, the thing that happened was we read a CSV in. So for example, here, I'm creating an object called grants data using the function read_CSV. The other important thing to note is that we use what's called the assignment operator. So that's this thing here. And what that does is it means it takes everything on the right side and assigns it to an object on the left side. And I know that was confusing for me when I started out because I expected to just do something like this. Read CSV data faketucky.csv. And you can actually do that. You see down here how it actually outputted some code. The thing though is it doesn't actually save it. All it does is it just displays those results. So if I want to save it, so let me call this like faketucky2, I have to use that assignment operator and create this object here. So faketucky2 only exists when I run this line of code where we assign the results of this function to this object. So now I have faketucky2 and I can click on it and I can see it up here in the viewer. Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going. So again, that's just what I said. All right, now that we have read in data, let me actually pause for a second, see if there are questions, because I've been talking for a little while and I like to see what questions folks have. So let me pause for a second.
I think there's just a couple people that are still having problems reading the data, and maybe the directory is off or something.
Yeah, I'm guessing with Rachel, I would just run that the use course function again, and then open that project. That's what I would do. Okay, not seeing any additional questions, so let me go ahead and, oh yeah, so Rebecca, can you explain the code without the assignment operator again? Yep. So let me copy this and go down here. So if I just run this line, which is on line 27 now, read CSV and then data faketucky.csv, go ahead and run that. The console is where it will output results. And so when I run that, what it's doing is it's actually showing the results of running that function. And so you can see it says a tibble, which is similar to what's called a data frame. It's showing that it's data. And it's showing, okay, the first column is student ID, then first high school, then school district, male, race, ethnicity, etc. And if I actually open up this object, so if I click on the object up here, note that that's the same, school or student ID, first high school attended, etc. So it's just showing the results here. Whereas up here, for example, let me delete this because I don't actually need that. That is that is what is actually saving that now as this faketucky object. Hopefully that kind of clarifies things for you. Okay, cool. All right, let me keep going. So let's take a look at our data, and I'm going to talk about various ways to do that. And then this is where we'll actually use the Skimar package in just a minute. So we can examine our data in several ways. If we type the name of our data frame, for example, faketucky, R will output the following, this. So let me actually go into here. So if I just type fake Tucky, and note that RStudio will autocomplete as well once I have an object loaded. So I'll do Command Enter to run that line. It's gonna output that same exact thing that happened when I did read CSV. And the reason why is because we saved the results to this object called fake Tucky. So now if I run this object called fake Tucky, again, it'll output the same exact thing. If you want to just look at the first few rows, you could do use the head function. So for example, if I do head fake Tucky 5, it'll show me just the first 5 rows, say. And here, fake Tucky and the number 5 are what are called arguments. So the first argument is the data frame that we're using, or tibble, and 5 is the number of rows that we're showing. In a similar vein, tail will show us the last X number of rows. So tail fake Tucky 5, comma, sorry, I should say fake Tucky comma 5 will show us the last 5 rows. Another thing you can do is use the view function. Let me copy this. And that will actually, I go into here and I do view with an up V, it will actually load fake Tucky here in the viewer. Again, as I showed before, you can also just click on the name of the object here. I do this all the time. I know a lot of people like to just view their data down here in the console, but I don't know. Just for me, it's easier to view it up this way. All right, so those are several ways that you can take a look at your data. Actually, let me show you one more that I didn't have in my slides, but I've started using a lot recently. There's also a function called glimpse. So if I run, for example, glimpse.fakeTucky, when I just type fake Tucky, it shows me the whatever columns it can fit, and then it tells me down below, you know, there are 57 something thousand more rows and 6 more variables. And it tells me the names of those variables, but it doesn't show me anything. If I do glimpse, it does kind of the opposite. So it puts the columns, each column as a row, and it shows me, okay, the first column is student ID, and then it shows me, you know, the first however many observations fit. Same thing for first high school attended, school district, male, race, ethnicity. And I should say this data is just made up data. It's, from some folks at Harvard made it, and it's just something I use just to import some data. It's not actually real data, but it's based on real data. Okay. So the Skimar package is a way to get some really simple kind of summary, or not summary statistics, but just get a kind of a sense of our data. Actually, it does provide some summary statistics. It provides, again, more detailed information, and it's broken up by the type of variable. So if you haven't installed Skimar, you'll need to do that. And then you can just run skim fake Tucky. So when you do that, skim fake Tucky. Run it again, see if that. Okay, so what it displays down here in the console is a nice summary of your data. It tells me, okay, your data, it's called fake Tucky. It's got 57 something thousand rows, 12 columns, and then it told me a bit about the columns. So for example, 3 of them are character. So in other words, they're text, or at least that's how our or the read CSV function has interpreted them. 9 are numeric. Group variables is none. I'm not going to get into that today. But if we look down here, you can see it tells us, for example, okay, this first high school attended, that's a character variable. So it's telling us these are the 3 that are character. It's telling us how many are missing, the complete rate. Obviously, it's 1 is what, 100%. Min and max is actually the length of the string. So there's one high school with a 4-letter name and one with a 14-letter name. It's got some other things, number of unique observations, etc. Down here for our numerics, it'll tell us, say, like let's look at percent absent, 0 missing, so 100% complete rate. It tells us the mean, the standard deviation, and then it tells us the value at the 0th percentile, the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, 75th percentile, and 100th percentile. That's weird. Now that I look at that, I have no idea why I never noticed that. It should not be 3,153% absent, because obviously that's not possible. So anyway, this allows us just to kind of get a sense of our data. I like to use it when I first start out, just to see, what my data looks like. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open the exercises.r file, follow the instructions to use the head, tail, view, and skim functions to take a look at your data. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm going to exit out of this. And just open up the exercises.r and you'll see the comments, and below each comment, go ahead and do the thing. So for example, write the function with the head to show the first 10 rows, and then same with tail, last 20, okay? Let me pop out the participants. So, and give me a thumbs up if you wouldn't mind when you are done. All right, looks like folks are good. Any particular questions on that folks have? Anyone notice anything unusual? Let me move this out of here. Anything unusual that you noticed on the output of the skim function here? Aside from the, I don't know what's up with the 3,153. Any of the other variables, anything look odd to you? It's not a trick question, there actually is something odd. Yes, thank you, Sarah. So you notice there are lots of 999 values. So we've got some issues, right? And I'm going to talk about two things. Several variables have the max values of 999. This seems suspicious, right? So the other thing is that some variables show up as numeric, but we know they're not really numeric. So as an example, like enrolled in college, that's a dichotomous variable. I mean, we can list it as 0, 1, which is, I'm guessing, what was the intention. But we can also read those in as a different type of variable. So I'm going to show you how you could read, for example, those variables in as characters. In R, there's also the idea of a more complex data type called factors, which you might actually want to use. But for now, I'm just going to show you how you can read them as characters. And we can add to our read _ CSV function to do that. So let's deal with each of these. Okay. So, sorry, I'm going through my slides, but not talking about them. So let's import our data again. And we're going to need to do two things to deal with this. We're going to need to tell read CSV, okay, how should you handle missing data? Because that 999 here that we saw, it's probably not actually 999. It's probably that 999 was used to indicate missing. And we just need to tell specifically the read CSV, hey, don't treat that as a real value. Instead, just treat it as missing. And then we're also going to tell ReadCSV to assign the correct data type to each variable, okay, for the ones that we want to read in as character, not as numeric. So let's do these one by one. So in terms of missing data, recall that this is how we imported our data the first time. So we just ran that line of code. But we can also add an argument to our code to tell ReadCSV what data is missing. And so note that we have a comma after this, and that indicates that there's an additional argument. And so the argument is NA equals. And we want to tell ReadCSV, hey, treat whatever I put here as missing. So if I go back here, let me actually just delete all these for simplicity. And I'm going to overwrite that. Close this. So if I run this again, I've now read this back in. And if I look in here, but before, like I can actually search here. I can search for 999. It looks like there are some 999s, but I'm guessing that's like maybe in the, I don't know what that would be in. But in any case, I don't see like 999s here. And actually to make sure, I can go ahead and just run skim fake Tucky again. Run it again. And now you can see that I don't have those 999s here, right? Because I've imported it and then run the skim function again on it. Okay, so that's how we can read in and tell ReadCSV what values to treat as missing. So again, just what I did. The other thing that we can do is we can tell ReadCSV which columns to treat as what data types. You may have seen this message when you read in your data. So let me even like show you where that showed up. Oh, you know what? Actually, hold on. Let me restart my session and run it again to see if I can generate that message. So I'm looking down here in the console. Okay, so of course, since I made these slides, they have actually changed the way it spits out. So now it shows me which ones are column and which ones are doubles, which double just means numeric. This is what it used to look like. So it's telling us, hey, these are the columns that I think are character, and these are the columns that I think are numeric. But let me go back and run that skim function again. And let me treat, for example, like free and reduced lunch. I don't actually want that to be numeric because it's really just a 1 or a 0. The student receives free or reduced lunch or they don't. So again, these are the data types that I talked about. And there are a lot that I'm not talking about. So we can add this here. And let me talk through what this is. And this is actually, if you download the materials like yesterday, anytime before, like right before we started, I actually, or no, I think yesterday I changed this. What we can do with the call types argument is we can say, I want you to treat these columns as this type. So for example, with enrolled in college, when I say enrolled in college equals C, that's saying don't treat enrolled in college as numeric, which is what our ReadCSV guess that it was based on the values. Instead, let's treat it as character. Same thing for free and reduced lunch, same thing for mail, same thing for received high school diploma. And it does have a kind of funny syntax, not funny, but a syntax you probably haven't seen, where you have to do list and then open parentheses, and then each column equals whatever type you want it to be. For now, just C is character, D would be double for numeric, but we're only turning things into characters. So we can list the columns that we want to turn into characters in this way. Then we have another closed parentheses. This one is matched to this one. And this closed parentheses actually matches this one up here. I will say most of the errors that I end up getting in R are due to like misplaced closed parentheses or commas that I misplaced, that kind of thing. So yeah. So if I go in here, and I'm going to delete that, paste that in, run that, and you can see now, if I go down to skim Fake-Tucky, the columns that I wanted to be character, for example, free and reduced lunch that we talked about before, now shows up character section, no longer in the numeric section. So this syntax is how we can tell read CSV if we want to manually say this is what this data type should be. Okay. So I want you to open up exercises.r, change the codes that you correctly import the Fake-Tucky data frame, telling read CSV which data is missing, and explicitly defining column types where necessary. So basically doing what I did just a minute ago. And I think that's all. After you make your changes, make sure you rerun the code, and then you can, I don't think I have it here, have a run skim on your newly created Fake-Tucky data frame and make sure that everything worked. Okay, so let me go back here. I'll just leave that up so folks can see. So again, just give me a thumbs up, or if you have questions, put them in the chat. Yeah, Kate, I mean, you could make student ID a character as well. Yeah. Oh, good question, Jocelyn. I'm gonna actually, I'll talk about that in just a second after. Kate, can you paste, Kate, can you paste your code into the chat that you were trying to run, and can take a look.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm not sure why the call types isn't working. You could also paste your code too if you want us to look at it.
I don't know, Kate. I don't know if any of the organizers see anything. That looks totally fine to me. Did it work, Kate, when you just read in read CSV without the call types? I wonder, are you in the project? Do you see intro meetup 1 October 2021? Very strange.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the code, I don't see anything wrong either, so I'm not sure.
Kate, I'm gonna actually, in just a second, show you one thing that, like, how I would deal with this, or how I would attempt to figure it out. Anyone else have issues, questions? All right. I'm going to close this. And Kate, I'm not forgetting about you. I'm just going to go through the slides. You'll see you actually set me up really nicely for the last slide that I have. Hopefully, you have gotten a sense of how R and RStudio work. You have learned now to, you've gotten everything set up. You've learned about packages, projects, how to import data, how to take a look at your data. Let me just show you one. Let me show you one last thing. So Kate, you asked about what's going on with a 3153 for data cleaning. So actually what I would do, that's actually a really good question. So let me actually deal with that. So what I would do is this. Within my NA argument, I can actually give it multiple values that I think are NAs. And the way I do that is using the C function. So with the C function, it just combines multiple things. So I would do, it was 3153, yeah. And I would say NA equals 999 and 3153. So let me run that again, and let me run skim fake tucky and see. That's very weird. It now has 658. Okay, so if I were really dealing with this, the way I would do it is this. I would add that, which is called a pipe. And I would say, sorry, this is getting a bit advanced for what we're doing today, but I would say basically mutate percent absent equal, or no, sorry. Yeah, replace NA. Let me write the code and then I'll explain. No, wait. Actually, let me do this. Let me do filter. Sorry, I'm struggling to think while I actually talk. So I would say mutate percent absent equals if else. So basically, if percent absent is greater than 1, make it an NA. Otherwise, keep it as percent absent. So I'm basically just changing it. Oh, so I need to make that. What is this? Yeah. Again, a bit more complex, but all this line does is it says if it's greater than 1, then make it missing. Otherwise, leave it as percent absent. So now if I went down to skim, yeah, now it looks good.
Do you want to you can copy that code into the
yeah,
chat?
Definitely. There we go. Okay, so let's talk lastly about getting help, because a really important skill with working with R is being able to get help. Several ways you can do it. First thing you can do, I haven't showed you this because I wanted to just kind of have you walk through things with me. But if you type read CS or any function and you just put the question mark in front of it, in the bottom right, it will open up the help file for that function. I will say the documentation for R functions varies widely. The tidyverse functions tend to have better documentation. And so it will give you, there's a skill to reading help files, but it will give you all the arguments that you can use. So you can see, for example, call types is here. Where was NA? NA is here. And down below, it'll explain a bit more about them. And then usually there will be at the bottom some examples that show you how to read in data. So I definitely start, if you're having trouble with a function, taking a look at the help file. I also highly recommend you take a look at the tidyverse website. So get that out of the way. Put it at the bottom maybe. So the Tidyverse website will, if you go to packages, you can see information about all the different packages. For example, if I click read R, it just has, they have really nice websites with help files, what are called vignettes, which are kind of like long form descriptions of how the packages work. Another reason why I really like Tidyverse is because of the websites that make it really easy to view the documentation. Again, these are the package vignettes. So if you're using the Tidyverse, I would just recommend going to the website and then clicking on the top. Oops, I think I already, or yeah, clicking on the top, there'll be like articles or something like that, and that will take you to the vignettes. Within, whoops, I don't want to open Visual Code Studio. You can also, gosh, we're gonna see how, oh yeah, that's right. So if you type vignette package equals Skimar, oops. I don't actually do this, no. Okay, really, I don't do this very much because I don't actually know how to load a vignette within the within R. Just one of the organizers want to help me.
I've never done that either, actually.
It is possible to load a vignette. Oh, maybe is it vignettes? No. Okay. Well. Again, if you're using Tidyverse packages, the websites will have the vignettes. Other places to get help, Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, I would, and you're considering using R, I would recommend joining Just for R. Use the RStats hashtag is what people use. It's where I have learned like 90% of what I know about Twitter, or sorry, what I know about Twitter, what I know about R. So definitely a great place to go. People are super welcoming, happy to help beginners. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. There's also R for Data Science community. It's a Slack community, people happy to give help there as well. And then last thing, and this is Kate with the last name, your question about, or the issue you ran into, I would Google that. And I like this quote from Cale Edmiston about what it means to be a skilled programmer. So if it were me and I got the, if I got that error that you got, whoops, I would Google it. So here's your error. So you would end up somewhere, oftentimes it'll be what's called Slack Overflow, which is a place where people will post issues. I don't know that I'm actually going to be able to solve it right now, but by Googling it, you're likely to find something, hopefully, that will allow you to kind of figure out what's going on. So I would probably just like scroll through these. And actually, you know, if I were doing this, I would actually add the name of the function that I was using. So I would do read CSV and then that, and see if I'm getting anything that looks relevant.
Kate actually has a really good question. She said she fixed the error by changing how things were tabbed over on each row, which shouldn't matter too much, but she said, can you share the significance of where the code is entered on the row? Like when you go into the line and tab over, like see how you have things tabbed over and whatnot.
So that shouldn't actually really matter.
Yeah, it shouldn't. It's more for an organization readability thing, but.
Yeah. I mean, like if I go
there
like
could have been possibly like a line break maybe in your code, Kate.
Yeah.
Like,
and I will say sometimes if you copy from Zoom, the chat, it like messes things up. So
yeah.
So we didn't solve your question, but hopefully gave you an idea for how you might think about starting. So I do see it is time for us to wrap up. Are there any final questions, things folks are thinking about before we wrap up? Oh, Kate, spaces after the end of a line and issue. I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think so either.
No. I wonder if you happen to have some weird something syntax, or not syntax, but like some weird character or something. Cheryl, if you want to uninstall a package and reinstall it, the easiest way, well, you can go to packages and you could find whatever package and hit that X. But the easiest way to do it is just to do install packages, package name, and then it'll just update to the latest version.
Okay, well, people can still ask questions, but I just want to say thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it. It was such a great talk. So thank you for being here. I'll stop this real quick and people can keep asking questions as long as David wants to stick around. So
yeah, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes.